Hello all, today I have a quick video showcasing how to build a super simple door inside of Neos. It's so simple that whenever you press the button like this, the door will open with a nice smooth animation. Press it again, it will close. This example I prepared is about 10 or so Logix nodes. I haven't exactly counted beforehand, but go ahead and pull them out here. Select the Logix folder, set packing route and unpack. This seems like a lot, don't worry, we'll go through it. Once we get to the building part of this, we'll explain what each of these nodes does and why they're here. But just to quickly summarize it, whenever you press this button, that's what this button right here is listening to, is this Logix node. Whenever you press this button, it'll toggle a Boolean Latch, which toggles between these two values, which is smooth lerped into a pack XYZ, and then we use a from Euler to get the rotation angles, and then we can set the rotation angles on each of these doors. So whenever you press this button, it results in this. Before we get started, I would like to mention that you can find all of the resources used for today's video in my public folder, in my tutorials subfolder. Oh, let me enable private UI real quick. There we go. Under my public folder, you can find tutorials, and then you'll find this tutorial under door. It's currently the only folder, but it'll grow with time. You'll want to grab this first one. You probably don't want this second one. We're going to delete it now. But this first one will just be the raw model without any fun Logix attached to it. So if you'd like to follow along, which is what I would highly recommend, go ahead and drag this out. This is CC0. I don't care what you do with it. I really do not care. I made it specifically for this video and probably for not any other videos. But all that aside, let me disable render private UI and we can get started. To start out, you're going to want to pull out a few ref cards we're going to be needing. So to start, we'll go ahead and select this with our inspector tool. Open inspector. Go up a directory till it says tutorial_door.glb. This is going to be our object root. Under our object root, we're going to want to hit the star, which will make a empty child. We're going to rename this to Logix. Not required, but this is a cleanliness thing. Keep nice and organized. And to get started, we're going to want to drag out the ref cards for either of the door frames. Not the door frames, the actual doors, excuse me. So we're going to grip select our right door, baked, drag that out, press trigger to pull that out. Same thing with the left door, grip to select, secondary to pull it out, and then we'll put this right next to the other one. After we pull those out, we're going to want to spawn out a button. To spawn out a button, we're going to want to get our inspector tool, open up our radio menu, press create new. We want to go down to object, Neos UI, button. This will spawn out a template button for us. We'll keep this right here for now. Once we have our button, we'll want to select that with our inspector tool, open with inspector, and then we want to go down here to where it says Neos or Neos button. We want to make sure we have that component in frame. Grab out our Logix tool, grip to select the Neos button component. Just hover over the title, grip to select, press secondary to drag it out. This will drag out a much bigger ref card. You don't have to worry about everything that's all here. We won't be touching on most of it, and we won't have this out for too long. But once we drag that out, we can close that button inspector. Press open up our radio menu, go to no browser. Once the no browser is open, we're going to want to go to interaction and then button events. This will get our button events that we need in order to trigger the door opening. So once the button events Logix node is out, we're going to want to go to our input for the button events, hold down trigger, drag out, and then release over the Neos button like that. So once that is there, we can go ahead and destroy this ref card so we don't get too confused, and then we'll drag this button events over here. What this will do is, if I drag out the pressed, every time I press this, it'll have a interval. So every press, it'll trigger. And this will also work by default with our laser. So if we press it with our laser, it'll also work. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this. And once that's out, we're going to want to get what's called a Boolean Latch. Those are stored under flow and very top Boolean Latch. This is a very simple Logix node, if we drag out, or if we look on the left side, go down, our first input is set, second input is reset, and our third and final input is going to be toggle. On the right side, our outputs are onset, which is going to be an event. On set, this event will trigger. We'll go ahead and drag this out. And then on reset, this will trigger an impulse here. And then our final output is going to be a bool. This bool is what you're going to be typically reading from with the Boolean latch. This is the value you're going to end up wanting to use in the future. But as an example, we'll drag out our first input, which is going to be set. Just make sure I'm in busy real quick. Lag just a tiny bit. Okay, yep, good. And then our second input is going to be reset. And then our third input is going to be toggle. Whenever I press our set input, you can see down here, whenever I press it, this top one has an impulse, and this bool will switch to true. So every time I press set, you can see this one does not change because it's already set to true, but it still triggers the onset event. So if I press this a few more times, still true, and it's still sending out events. If it's the same thing with the reset, except instead of onset, if I press the reset, it'll trigger the on reset event. So if I press this a few times on reset, it'll do that. And now this bottom input here, this toggle, is a little bit special. It'll take whatever value it is, invert it, and then trigger the corresponding event. So since it's false, whenever I press this, it'll do true, and then trigger the onset event. If I press this again, it'll switch to false and trigger the on reset event. So if I press this a few times, you can see them going from the bottom to the top, to the bottom to the top, just like that. So we'll go ahead and get rid of all of these. We're not going to need these, but we will need our Boolean latch right here. We're going to, well, for this example, we're going to want to have a button that toggles between an open state and a closed state. We're going to want to set this button event pressed event to toggle, so that every time you press this button like this, boom, it'll switch to false once you press it. Press again, true, keep pressing it, toggles between the states. Just drag this over here, and then once we have the Boolean latch, we're going to want to go to, oh my goodness, I keep getting, the one time I'm getting messages. Okay, back on subject, we're going to want to go back to operators, and then we were going to want to pull out this question mark semicolon node. This node is also another one you'll commonly use. This node takes in 2 input values, well 3 technically, but 2 float values and 1 Boolean value. We'll go ahead and drag out inputs here, and then our output. We're going to change these on the left to different numbers. We'll do 5 for the top one and 8 for the bottom one. As you can see, our output switched to 8. Then if we press or invert this Boolean to true, it'll do 5. What this node does is it'll, depending on the state of this Boolean, it'll choose between either the top value or the bottom value. If you hover your Logix node over each of the inputs, you can see it says on true. Whenever this node has true on this condition right here, it'll read from this value. If you go down one to our second input, it says on false. Whenever this Boolean is false, it'll read from this bottom value. So if I switch this to false, it switches to 8, true, 5. We're going to be using this to toggle between this, the rotations of either door. So we'll drag this up right here. And to set our rotation values, we're going to set those using this node right here. For our top one, we're going to want to just leave this with empty. We could drag it out and have a 0 right here, but I like to personally have it empty, since this node will default to 0 on any unset inputs. So for now, we'll just destroy this top one, and on this bottom one, we'll enter in a value of 85. So whenever this is false, it should output an 85, but when this changes to true, it'll output a 0. That is good. You can delete these two, but leave this 85 value right here. We will connect this Boolean latch bool to our condition on our question mark node right here. Once that's done, we're going to want to get another node called Smooth Lerp. That is going to be under the Math in the Logix nodes browser, all the way down to where it says Smooth Lerp. Smooth Lerp is not to be confused with Slurp. That is something different. We want Smooth Lerp. Double click, spawn this out right here. And then what this does is it will smoothly transition from a target value to the next target value. So if I drag out the output here, drag out our first input, drag out our second input, you can see the top input is our target. This is what the value we're going to want to have at the finish line. This is what we're going to want to have our value set to. This bottom one is going to be speed. The speed we can change to 5. This will, of course, determine the speed at which our target number is reached. So if I change this to a 5, watch this output on the right. Change it to 5. You can see it smoothly transitions to something close to 5. If I change it to 200, see it very quickly gets to the 200. Change it back to 0. Very quickly gets back to 0, but not instantly. This smooth lerp helps us prevent very hard switches between door opening and door closed. If you want your door to really slam open or slam close without a smooth animation, you can just ignore the smooth lerp and proceed with the tutorial without it. But we're going to be using smooth lerp since we want a smooth animation here, so we're going to have that here. We're going to connect our smooth lerp input to the output of our question mark node right here. And then for speed, we're going to want to drag out an input, and for now we're going to type in 5. We can adjust this as we need to later, but for right now 5 will be a good testing ground for that. Once we have that all set up, we're going to want to get a pack XYZ node. That can be found under the operators, all the way down at the very bottom where it says pack XYZ. We're going to want to drag out 2 of these nodes. Put them right here next to each other, one on top and one on bottom. Each one of these is going to go to a different door. Because of how this model is set up, it may be different in different models, but this model, the doors, if they don't have separate XYZs, they'll fold in on opposite directions. This is not something we want. And then before we're out of this folder, we're going to want to pick up this node right here, our -n. This will basically just invert whatever number it gets. It doesn't matter which pack XYZ you put this to, just pick one. I'm going to choose this one, and then we're going to connect the Y input on the pack XYZ to the -n. From there, we're going to want to connect our smooth lerp output to our Y value on the top, and then we're going to want to connect it to the -n on whichever side you decided to plug it into. So it should look like this. Smooth lerp goes into pack XYZ on 1, and then smooth lerp goes into -n, which then goes into pack XYZ on the bottom. Make sure they're all feeding into the Y for this specific model because these doors rotate on the Y axis. From there, we're going to want to go back up to Math on the Logix nodes browser. And then we want to look for another folder called Rotation. In Rotation, we're going to want to pull out the node from Euler. You don't have to worry too much about what this node is and what it does, but the basics of it is we're going to be using this to convert a XYZ value into a rotation value that Neos can understand here. As you can see, this rotation value is about the same color as this rotation here. We just need this for conversion's sake. So I'll go ahead and delete all this. We'll need another from Euler since we're going to need one on the bottom here too. Just connect the pack XYZ to the Eulers on either side as you need it. And then from the Euler Logix, we can just select take the output here, drag it over the rotation on the ref card we spawned out at the very beginning of this video. Just drop it onto that. As you can see, the door just opens wide open. And then we'll do it on the bottom here, rotation down there, and just like that. If we press this button now, see we now have a functioning door. And I would just like to demonstrate real quick what Smooth Lerp does here. So if I just drag this out to the back here, and drag this out like this, connect this Y and this here and just bypass the smooth lerp entirely. If we were to press the button now, you can see it just very quickly, very unsmoothly closes and opens. So if you want that, just bypass the smooth lerp, but if you don't want that, just have the smooth lerp here. Just like that. And if you want the door to open and close faster, you can change this number. I think higher numbers make it slower. Oh, nope. I know some nodes, higher numbers make things slower. Some nodes have lower numbers be faster. So, lower number, have the door open and close slower. 7, much faster. And then from here, before we finish up, we're going to want to make sure we pack this under our creation. So we're going to go back to our Logix empty we made earlier. Going to grip select that, but instead of pressing secondary, we're going to open up our radio menu and press the button that says set packing route. Press that. You should see our little purple thing change. So now we are packing every Logix node we have under this child empty right here. So if we go over to any Logix node, hold down secondary, you'll see a little circle come in. Pack that. And now if you come over here, you can see we now have an arrow. And all of our Logix is now packed into this. So whenever we save this, the Logix will save with it, making sure this door still works. I'm going to deselect that. So if I press this button, see, it still works.